Happy Cities Embodied Carbon. Carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere from construction. In the automotive and construction industries, we are beginning to understand that we are responsible for much of the man-made carbon dioxide emissions on our planet. Some of these emissions are due to the energy consumption of buildings during use. But there is also another side to buildings and climate change that has received almost no attention until recently. Finland and the European Union are currently considering whether to create a concrete carbon budget to help with climate action. The basic idea of the budget is that, for example, every Finn would be given a carbon backpack that meets the climate targets for the next 30 years. The carbon footprint of a Finn is one of the heaviest in the world now. It is around 10 tons per year per Finn. The Finnish climate panel calculated how carbon emissions should be reduced in accordance with international climate targets by 2050. Finland is one of the richest countries in the world in terms of gross domestic product. In the stricter carbon backpack model, the maximum amount of carbon emissions in 30 years would be 16 tons per Finn. So, in 30 years, the Finnish climate panel is a scientific, independent expert body, the establishment of which is provided for in Finnish law. The panel appointed by the Ministry of the Environment has 14 members, including 13 professors representing different disciplines related to climate change. For comparison, over the past 30 years, a Finn's coal backpack has lightened by about 20%. Embodied carbon. It is about carbon dioxide, which is released from building materials. The manufacture of building materials, transportation, the construction of the building itself, the demolition phase of the building, and demolition waste. This phase is responsible for greenhouse gas emissions with a very significant carbon footprint. 11% of all man-made emissions on our planet. Given the importance of this issue, it is important that we understand how to work on this issue in the future. Where do we go from here? Of the carbon footprint of buildings to be built from 2020 to 2050, it is estimated that the carbon footprint during use will account for about half of the total carbon footprint of buildings built on Earth. And the other half of the carbon footprint will be made up of greenhouse gases generated by the manufacture, demolition and recycling of buildings. Life cycle assessment forms are used to calculate the building's carbon footprint. To find out the carbon footprint of a building, we first need to get a basic understanding of how much carbon is associated with each material and measure used in the building. After that, we add up all the components used in construction and demolition. After which we can see how large the calculated carbon footprint of the building is. The data we use comes from life cycle assessments, which look at all stages of a material's life cycle and add up all the carbon emissions that have occurred. We can add up the sum of all these emissions and get an idea of the carbon footprint that comes from manufacturing the building. We can dramatically impact the climate change impact of any building. But otherwise, similar to 1,000 square meters. Each apartment building consists of 16 apartments. The first apartment building is a typical apartment building. It has commonly used building materials that have a high carbon footprint in their class. This building has a carbon footprint of 207 tons before anyone even moves in. This is a huge carbon footprint, so we can also choose a less polluting construction method. We could make even better choices with the materials and technologies already available on the market. We can make a completely identical apartment building from the outside, which would store 125 tons of carbon in itself. We could call such a building a carbon store and, for example, an environmental act. So, what does 125 tons of coal mean if it is converted into the mileage of a petrol-powered passenger car? Or even into flying? 125 tons of coal correspond to 290,000 liters of gasoline combustion. If the average consumption of a car is 6 liters per 100 kilometers, then with that amount of fuel you will drive almost 5 million kilometers. Or alternatively, fly 240 flights from Helsinki to Brussels, and back. How is it possible to store carbon dioxide emissions in a building? During photosynthesis, plants capture carbon from the atmosphere. That carbon is stored in the plants themselves, as well as in the soil. The amount of carbon stored in organic meals can be significantly higher than the emissions produced by harvesting. This provides us with an effective way to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. We can use these as materials to offset the emissions of other materials in the building, and we can make buildings with a positive carbon footprint. Carbon can be sequestered in a building. The carbon handprint of a building means the positive climate impacts of construction. That would not arise without the construction of the building. Directly to the Embodied Carbon in Construction Calculator, EC3. Are you with us? Are you with us? Let's build happy cities to Ukraine together. Thanks for watching the video.